Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My fabulous co-host, 2023 Shirley Jackson Award finalist Laura Blackwell, I never get tired of saying that, uh, has the night off tonight. I'm on my own with you this evening. Um, I hope that you're all healthy, safe, and taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. I started Story Hour early in COVID lockdown in spring 2020. And my intention was just to set up a space where my writer friends and I could get together and share our work and create a little bit of, a little candle in the darkness, a little bit of community and light in a very, very weird and scary time, a very, SF-nal time, uh, which it was. And shortly after I kicked it off, I asked my friend Laura to join me in co-hosting it. And since then, it has just taken off. We've been going strong for 4 years, almost 4.5 years. The only week we miss is traditionally the week between Christmas and New Year's. And we've had literally hundreds of authors through these rooms sharing their really wonderful work with you. So it's been just an incredible surprise to both of us and a real privilege. The way this works is really simple, and we invoke what I think is one of the oldest forms of human entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire just telling each other lies. So um, every week we do that. Tonight we are really excited to have Annika Barranti Klein and Maggie Slater, and we're going to start the evening with Annika Barranti Klein. Annika lives and writes in a tiny apartment in LA with her family, partner, teenage kids, and tabby cat, and more books than she can possibly read in a lifetime. That sounds really familiar. Her short fiction and poetry have appeared in Asimov's Craft, Fireside, Fusion Fragment, The Future Fire, Weird Horror, Worlds of Possibility, and more. Her novels are represented by Kate McKean at Howard Morhaime Literary Agency, and she is the guest editor for Interstellar Flight magazine's 2024 Flash Fiction series. When she's not writing, which is probably not very often, I'd guess, she is probably knitting, baking, watching Star Wars, or attempting to learn a new hobby. And most recently, that's amateur birding. And you can find all of Annika's publications and sign up for her newsletter at annikaobscura.com. So Annika, welcome to Story Hour. Take it away, please.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I am going to read A Touch of Magic, which was published in Kaleidotrope almost exactly 2 years ago. And my working title for this story was Witch Fulfillment. Jane Heldon was looking for 3 things in a home: a short commute, a nice kitchen, and a chance to finally be happy. The last was the hardest to explain to her realtor. She didn't know how to describe the feeling of emptiness that she longed to fill. She told her realtor, a lovely woman named Frances, that she was looking for a place that was a little bit magical. Frances nodded knowingly and took Jane to a quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac near the mill stream. One side of the street was park-like with no homes visible, and the other was charming early to mid-century duplexes. Frances led Jane to the duplex at the end of the street off the roundabout. Frances explained that across the street there was a path to a public swimming hole, but the house view was of a private stretch of the stream, so Jane could expect relative privacy. The common wall, Frances said, was shared with a retired couple who traveled extensively. The house was a dream. It had real parquet flooring throughout, charming little wood tiles stained a medium brown that shone red in the sun. The kitchen had a breakfast nook with a large window overlooking the stream. There were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. The landing at the top of the stairs was spacious and had a built-in linen closet. Besides the eat-in kitchen, there were a front room, a parlor, and a powder room downstairs, as well as a windowless formal dining room that Jane thought would make a very nice library. It even had a fireplace. She put an offer on the house immediately. A week later, she met Frances at her favorite coffee shop. It was near her apartment, and she supposed she would miss it when she'd moved. They both got sandwiches, even though it was not a proper mealtime. Jane had one with Gouda cheese, arugula, and a sharp but sweet apple of a variety she was unfamiliar with. She thought to herself that she would have to look for them at the farmer's market next week. Frances ordered a cup of tea, which she drank with lemon, and Jane ordered coffee, which she drank plain. They talked about where they'd gone to college and their favorite places to go. They both loved to spend an afternoon just wandering a museum. Frances loved the Natural History Museum, while Jane usually went to the Modern Art Gallery, which was full of pieces she did not understand. And then after they ate, Frances took a folder out of her bag and placed it on the table in front of Jane. And just like that, she signed the papers to buy the house. It had been so easy that she couldn't believe it when Frances handed her the keys. Like magic. Jane rode her bike straight to the house to see if it was really real. She walked into the empty house and just breathed in the quiet. She walked back to the kitchen and found a vase of alstroemeria on the windowsill above the sink. She loved lilies. Frances must have left them. The vase was a lovely amber crackled glass. She called Frances to say thank you and told her she could stop by any time to pick up the vase. Frances said it was hers to keep. It was perfect. Jane slept in her apartment, aware of every street noise all night. In the morning, she unplugged her coffee pot and carefully biked to the house with it, her favorite mug, the one with the bird on it, her coffee grinder, and a bag of her favorite beans, all wrapped up in a beach towel and tied to the basket. She made coffee in her new empty kitchen and sat on the floor, the beach towel folded like a cushion to drink it. Jane went shopping, determined to fill her new home with the perfect items, every one of them just right for her and for the house. She found seating for the parlor and the library, the sofa large enough that a grown person could sleep on it if they wanted to. Unsure what to do with the front room, she chose a break front and a bench, leaving room to add on later. She hired a woman to build bookshelves and one to paint. She bought a bedroom set for her room and a smaller one for the guest room, with a luggage stand in case someone came to stay for a while. Pots and pans and canning goods, dishes with tiny roses on them, and amber glasses that perfectly matched the vase Frances had left. Pillows and bedding and curtains and rugs. She visited galleries and found art for her walls. And lastly, finally, after searching all over town for just the right one, she found a white and red enamel table with red vinyl chairs for the breakfast nook. After careful consideration, she also bought a turquoise typewriter with a carrying case to match. She ordered a fresh ribbon and correction tape for it. She'd always wanted to write again. She once won a prize in school. On a whim, Jane picked up a deck of cards in the antiques barn where she found the table and chairs and the typewriter. They appeared to be hand-painted and included several face cards she'd never seen before. She assumed that it was some sort of tarot deck. She tucked it into her purse and asked for everything else to be delivered the following week. She slept every night in her apartment, which she no longer thought of as hers, and worked every day at her job. Every morning she woke early and biked to the house for her coffee before work. Some evenings when 5 o'clock rolled around, she could not stand to spend hours at the apartment and instead biked to the new house and sat on the kitchen floor until it was nearly dark, biking back to the apartment as fast as she could. The majority of Jane's furniture arrived at the house the same afternoon that she got the phone call about layoffs. She had taken the day off to receive the furniture and was sitting on the kitchen floor when she took the call. She stood up and wandered through the no longer empty rooms, surveying her magical new house that she could no longer afford, feeling utterly defeated for a moment. Then she squared her jaw and bicycled to the local nursery where she purchased everything she would need for a garden. She paid for it and arranged to have it delivered, biked home again and spent hours in her new kitchen baking, making jams and pickles, and filling her pantry and a full-sized freezer with food to last for months. Exhausted, Jane sat at her kitchen table, rummaging through her purse for a candy bar or a cigarette or anything she wouldn't have to cook. She found the deck of cards and took it out to examine it more closely. She had never read the tarot, but she found herself laying 3 cards on the table and staring at them. The first one was a small, indistinct figure with piercing eyes. Jane's only thought when looking at it was monster. The second was a wild-haired woman with pale, almost green-hued skin. She was not smiling. Witch. The third, who was smiling, could only be described as the devil. Jane returned the monster and the devil to the deck. and propped the witch up against the window pane. It was twilight outside, the time Jane remembered her father calling the gloaming. The woman seemed to appear out of nowhere, emerging from the little wood between the house and stream, suddenly looming up behind the card. Witch. Jane was instantly ashamed of herself for thinking it, but there was no denying that the woman looked eerily like the painting. Surely the green skin was a trick of the light, but the wild hair and Stevie Nicks ensemble were uncanny. Jane stared impolitely until the woman rapped on the window. Jane stood up and opened the back door. The woman peered around the doorway as though deciding whether or not to come in. Jane was not sure, but she thought the woman sniffed once or twice. Evidently, she decided yes, she would come in, and she stepped inside abruptly, pushing roughly past Jane. She opened cupboards and riffled through the pantry, leaving doors open and spilling a jar of pencils on the counter. She plunked 2 mugs on the counter and pried open a tin of tea leaves Jane had never seen before, grabbing a fistful and dividing it carelessly between the cups. She picked up Jane's kettle from the stovetop and set it back down, hard on the stove. It whistled instantly. Jane was sure the kettle had been empty, but the woman, was this a woman? Poured out steaming hot water into the mugs. She carried them to the table, swirling the water in the cups. She gently blew on one before setting it down and gesturing toward the chair, grunting at Jane to sit. Jane sat. The witch, Jane knew she shouldn't think of the woman as a witch, gestured and grunted, "Drink." Jane wasn't sure if the word actually came out of her mouth or if she just felt it. She was sure the tea was boiling hot, but she picked up the mug and sipped gingerly. It was the perfect temperature. Jane smiled politely. "My name is Jane, and you are?" The witch swirled her tea and said, "You can call me Timber." Jane wasn't sure where to go from there. Timber spoke again, saving her the trouble. "What are you looking for, Jane?" I want to be happy?" "Is that a question or is it what you want?" "I want to be happy." Timber swirled her tea and closed her eyes, perhaps thinking it over. Jane waited, sipping her tea until she found herself with an empty cup, with only damp tea leaves at the bottom. She set it down, and Timber grabbed it, peering into it with one bulging eye. "Oh, you mean you want to be happy," Timber said accusingly, as though that were not what Jane had just said. "I will help you." "Thank you," Jane started, "but that's not necessary." "I didn't say I could," Timber interrupted, "nor did I say I might. I said I will." Jane decided that it was really too late to do anything about Timber, so she might as well go along with it. At least she hadn't chosen the devil's card. Then she might be having tea or worse with the actual devil. Timber sent her to bed, and Jane obeyed. The next morning, Jane woke and found that it was already late morning. It was so quiet. She got up and went to the bathroom, and when she came back into her bedroom, Timber was there with a tray full of coffee and scones. Jane had not made scones. She supposed Timber had baked them, or perhaps magicked them. Jane sat at the small table by her window. The table had not been there when she went to bed, and drank her coffee. She took a bite of a scone. It was delicious and tasted only very slightly of magic. After breakfast, Jane took a long, hot bath. Eventually, she made her way downstairs and found the kitchen in a state. It seemed that Timber had baked the scones. The counters were covered in detritus and dirty dishes. Jane went to start washing up, and Timber appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, and stopped her, grunting and gesturing at the kitchen table. Jane looked, and her typewriter was set up, a stack of paper beside it, and another cup of coffee as well. Jane sat. Timber moved to the stove and banged her fist on top of it, then to the counter and did the same. The mess vanished. Jane was impressed and a little afraid. Timber set a radio on the windowsill and turned it on. Jane was quite sure she did not own a radio, nor was she certain what sort of music was coming out of it now. Jane put a piece of paper into her typewriter and wound the wheel. She began typing. The Timber Witch. Oh, Jane thought. This was not the story she had intended to write. She glanced at Timber, thinking of throwing away this page and trying again. Timber narrowed her eyes and shook her head. Jane kept typing. She worked until the stack of paper was gone. It lasted to exactly the end of a scene. Somehow her coffee cup never emptied. She was not at all sure whether Timber had magicked it to stay full or quietly refilled it the old-fashioned way. She wound the wheel, took out the last page, and tidied the stack. Then she stood and stretched. She was hungry, and something smelled marvelous. She went looking for Timber and found her on the front porch with a bowl of soup, a cup of tea, and a hunk of bread. The witch glanced up at her and snarled, "Get your own." Jane walked back inside and served herself from the stovetop where everything was waiting. The soup in a large pot, the bread on a wooden board. She poured a glass of water to drink and took it all to the porch on a tray. Timber finished eating first and vanished before Jane could try to engage her in conversation. She wanted to ask what she was doing there, why she had come, what her intentions were. When Jane finished eating and went inside, she found that curtains and art had been hung, rugs laid, and books placed on shelves. She found Timber out back building a bonfire with all of the boxes and packing materials. Jane was sure she saw her throw a handful of herbs or dirt or some such thing into the fire, and she knew it did not smell like a regular fire. It was not a bad smell, but a sweet one. She went inside and back to work. There was a new stack of paper next to the typewriter, a fresh bouquet of flowers in Frances's vase, and a cup of peppermint tea with a little plate of white, crumbly cookies that tasted like almonds. Jane started to type again, the words coursing through her and appearing on the paper almost without her knowing what she was typing until she had typed it. This went on for several weeks until one day Jane typed "the end." She knew that she wasn't truly done, but this was the first story she'd finished even a rough draft of since, well, college, she supposed. Writing used to make her feel tired, but now she only felt exhilarated. Perhaps this was what it was like to be a man writing a novel, with your wife or your mother doing everything else for you. Ashamed, Jane went to draw her own bath, but Timber had already fixed it for her. It was hot and bubbly and smelled good, and Jane was sure the window over the bathtub was larger than it had been when she bought the house. After her bath, she put on her robe and went downstairs to make dinner. She smelled chicken roasting in the oven and saw that the table was set for two, her writing accoutrement nowhere to be seen. There were greens in the sink, and her vase was on the windowsill, empty. Timber came in through the back door, clutching what looked like a piece of wood. "Are you eating with me tonight?" Jane asked. "No. Get dressed. Your lady friend is coming over." Timber set down the item she'd been carrying, and it wasn't a piece of wood at all, but a bottle of wine. "My lady friend?" Timber ignored her and moved to the sink, where she started washing potatoes. Jane went upstairs and got dressed. As she came down the stairs again, the doorbell rang. She opened the door and found Frances there with a bouquet of flowers in her hands. "Your grandmother called me. I hope it's all right?" Jane stepped back and held the door open. "Of course it's all right. How are you?" They exchanged pleasantries, and Jane took Frances's jacket. Timber came out of the kitchen and snatched the flowers from Jane. When she led Frances into the kitchen, the flowers were in the vase on the windowsill, the food was on the table, and Timber was nowhere to be seen. "Isn't your grandmother staying for dinner?" "She does what she wants," Jane laughed. "She tells me you've written a novel." "Yes, I just finished it this afternoon." "Goodness, that's fast. How do you write so quickly?" "Magic, I guess," Frances laughed. "Getting laid off helped." "Oh, I'm sorry." "Don't be." They sat quietly eating for a while. Jane remembered the wine and poured them each a glass. It was very good, earthy without being bitter. Jane didn't know any of the proper words for wine tasting. After dinner, they took the rest of the bottle into the library. Jane was going to build a fire, but one was already burning and the room was cozy and warm. Jane looked around the room. She was sure she had only bought one wingback reading chair, but now two flanked the fireplace, close enough that their occupants might hold hands if they wished to. The next morning, Jane woke up and remembered that Frances had stayed in the guest room after they had finally finished the nearly bottomless bottle of wine. She crept downstairs to make breakfast for Frances. The coffee was made, and there was a basket of muffins with a note. "Good luck." Jane smiled and silently thanked Timber.
That was lovely. Thank you,
Thank
Annika.
you.
I really enjoy. I didn't want to leave your world. I'm a little sad that I'm not in it anymore. Really lovely work. Thank you so
Thank
much. Typically here at Story Hour, between authors, we just take a minute. We take a pause, take a breath, and just sort of let the previous work resonate a bit and kind of shift gears in order to prepare ourselves for the next author. So we're going to do that now. We're just going to just take a breath, take a pause. All right then. Annika Barranti Klein, folks. Thank you so much, Annika. Our next author is Maggie Slater. Maggie's speculative fiction has appeared in Apex, Metaphorosis, and Redivider, among other venues. She lives in an 1800s farmhouse in New England with two half-tamed boys, one half-trained dog, her husband, her parents, and at least one benign ghost. Wow. When she has an almost quiet moment, she enjoys Haruki Murakami novels, sampling craft beer, and hoarding cheap notebooks. I do that. For more information about her and her current projects, visit her blog at maggieslater.com or find her on Instagram at maggie.writes. Maggie, welcome to Story Hour. Take it away.
Thank you so much. So this story is called The Showerlier. There's not much, I would say, in terms of trigger warnings, but I will say there's a tiny bit of death, a tiny bit of suicide ideation, and maybe a pinch of classism. So just so you know. The Showerlier. Dylan Brooks was a shower connoisseur. After 13 years in the medical field, Dylan realized he hated his job, hated the system, and wanted more than anything to do something he enjoyed. Dylan loved taking showers. So he quit, moved to a smaller apartment in a cheap part of town, and set up shop as a shower specialist. What he did was this. A client, perhaps a prospective buyer or a hotel manager, would contact him to test their showers. He was hypersensitive to water purity, temperature shifts, and pressure issues. He could detect hard water buildup by the timbre of a shower's jets. He could identify too much salt in a softening system simply by rubbing his wettened fingertips together. He never soaped himself while he was testing a shower. Too much soap dried his skin and ruined his subtler senses of touch. But he went through the motions each time. He checked the distance to the inlaid soap caddy, or, God forbid, the tub ledge where the shampoo might be perched. He made sure that the towel bar was near enough to access without losing the warmth trapped in the shower bay. He even noted where moisture gathered post-washing, so the owner could better prevent mold. So many things went into making a shower pleasant or unpleasant, but most clients simply wanted to know if the shower was functional. In layman's terms, that meant steady water pressure, tolerable temperature control, and a decent bathroom layout. Most didn't appreciate the subtle variations between showers, and when he could have expounded for hours and hours on the virtues of proper drainage and the features of disparate showerhead systems, he rarely found an audience who cared. Check the box, that's all they wanted, but he enjoyed the work. Nothing soothed him more than hot water streaming over his skin. A hissing deluge on a porcelain tub delighted him in a way that professional gossip never had. And since most people spent a sizable chunk of their lives in the bathroom, it made sense that his clients wanted to optimize the experience. This business didn't flood him with funds, but it paid the rent on his studio apartment, and he didn't need much. He had a steady list of commercial clients, mid-level hotels and apartment buildings mostly, which maintained his simple lifestyle. So when Mr. Langford of the Rosetta Vue, a 500-unit luxury compartment, called him up one April afternoon, Dylan was cautious. Luxury apartment managers tended to expect luxury service, specifically on-call availability, and they tended to push back on his findings, minimizing any issues he might report, to avoid the cost of repair. Dylan doubted he needed the headache. "It's 1546, Mr. Langford said. We've had some bad luck with the apartment. Tenants defaulting on their rents after a few months and vanishing without a trace, and the water bill runs through the roof whenever it's occupied. The plumbers say it's not a leak or anything, but whenever a tenant disappears, they deliberately leave the shower running, day and night sometimes, until a neighbor complains and we have to let ourselves in. Gerald Plunkett from the Riverbank Inn recommended you, and I'm all out of options. Will you take a look at it?" Dylan winced, but forgave the slight, a mere overflow of Mr. Langford's desperation. A successful resolution for 1546 could mean a significant increase in Dylan's profile in another business stream. If his bank account hadn't been at an all-time low, he might have turned it down, but after a few more questions regarding the shower, he agreed to come by the following Thursday. The Rosetta View was a sculpture of sleek glass in a city's financial district. Through its revolving door, a river of sharp suits and designer dresses passed, a hungry spring in every step. He'd known people like this in the hospital system, drowning in excess cash, excess hours, and excesses. Dylan pushed through the spinning door and approached the concierge desk. A young woman perched behind the granite slab with a waterfall edging would have been more fitting in a powder room than in the lobby. Her enormous glasses reminded Dylan of the 80s, but slicker. He hesitated under her scrutinizing glare as she took in the towel draped over his arm. Mr. Langford asked me to inspect 1546? She forced a practiced smile. Oh, you're the shower specialist. Showerlier, he thought, but didn't correct her, fearing she'd laugh at him. That's right. May I go up? The girl handed him a card key. 15th floor on the left, end of the hall. Please let me know if you need anything else. She said the last part out of habit and turned her attention to the woman clicking across the lobby in 6-inch stilettos. Her smile brightened with genuine glee. Oh, my God, tell me those are your new shoes. Apparently dismissed, he left them gabbing and headed for the elevator. He found 1546 without any trouble. His footsteps rang on the dark laminate floor when he entered. On the outermost wall, his reflection haunted the floor-to-ceiling windows. He found the bathroom beyond the entryway, on the right. The bathroom was unremarkable. It was white, all white, as though that could hide the lack of natural light, and had only the basic appointments, a vanity, a toilet, and a bath-shower combo at the end. He drew the utilitarian curtain back and forth, pleased that the bar didn't snag the rings. Then he closed the bathroom door, hung the towel, undressed, and placed the folded clothes on the vanity. He never turned on the overhead fan when he showered on the job. At home, he practiced all the typical mildew-fighting habits, squeegee, tile spray, fan. But on the job, he preferred to let the shower speak. He turned on the faucet and trailed his fingers through the gushing water as it warmed to just below piping hot. Then he switched on the shower head and stepped into the jet. Dylan caught his breath. There was nothing notable about how the hot water rushed over him, sending plumes of smoke into the cold bathroom, and yet he sensed something different. He stood for a long while as the water thundered over his neck and trickled down to his toes. The water smelled fresh, without the usual chemical undertones of industrial purifying. No, this was more like well water, or better still, as if a mountain hot spring had been funneled straight to the shower head. Close, he thought, but not quite. There was depth to the water, as if sourced from somewhere far underground. It felt free, somehow, untamed, ancient and nourishing. Every ache and pain slipped away under its caress, renewing him, revitalizing him. He envisioned the shower's pipes descending into the earth to an untapped aquifer unsullied by man, the perfect water. He shivered in the steam, sweat purling on his brow. In all his life, he had never taken such a delicious shower. Looking back, he admitted that he milked the opportunity, lingering as he evaluated every detail. His fingers and toes were wrinkly when he finally stepped onto the bath mat. As he dried himself, he noticed that his towel felt crusty. He looked it over, half expecting to discover he'd brought an unwashed towel by accident, but found no evidence. His clothes, too, were tacky, and when he smelled them, he drew back in repulsion. How had he considered these clothes clean enough to rewear? He must reek in them. Mortified, he dressed and wrenched his coat around him, zipping it up to the neck to hold the stench at bay. Then he hurried down to the lobby. The girl at the desk glanced up. Did her smile seem brighter than before, more delighted to see him? How'd it go? She asked as he attempted to slip by. He hesitated. Not bad. It's a fine shower, I'll say that much. Not sure I'll be of much help to Mr. Langford. Did his eyes deceive him, or was she blushing? Maybe he'll have you come back again sometime. He didn't know what to make of the flirty twist in her smile, and still horrified by the odor of his clothes, he said goodbye and hurried out. Dylan intended to report to Mr. Langford the following day, but something held him back. It felt wrong to write about such a shower in the usual formal tone, so he delayed, telling Mr. Langford it would be ready by Monday at the earliest. Dylan had other appointments anyways, and he convinced himself he needed a sizable chunk of time to give to the Rosetta View shower the attention it deserved. Dylan returned to professional showering, but none of the showers he took in other visibly superior bathrooms made any impression on him. In fact, several outright revolted him with greasy water that left him feeling worse after washing in them. Everything seemed dirtier to him. Even after several more washes, his clothes retained their unpleasant funk. His own shower disgusted him, left his skin itchy. He was exhausted all the time. The only thing he enjoyed was thinking of that invigorating wash in 1546. God, what a beautiful shower. Nothing else compared to it, not even close. The finest rainfall showerhead left him shuddering from the touch of subpar droplets. He couldn't help envisioning the pipes of every other shower extending directly into the sewer, despite knowing that wasn't true. On Friday, he called Mr. Langford. Well, what did you think? There's something wrong with it, isn't there? Oh, I knew it. Mr. Langford sounded as if he'd been biting his fingernails to the quick while waiting for Dylan's call. I'm not sure yet, Dylan said. I'm afraid I need to test it once more to confirm some findings. Could I come by today? Oh, I suppose, if it won't take too long. It's only, we have a walkthrough scheduled with prospective tenants at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Could you come by immediately? Dylan tried to keep the glee out of his voice. In his mind, he was already stepping into the streaming jets. I'm on my way now. Grabbing a plastic bag containing new slacks, a polo shirt, and a towel he'd bought the day before, Dylan hurried to the Rosetta View. His memory did not fail him. The instant he stepped into the shower, the freshness overwhelmed him. It was as if the water had never encountered a human before, never known what a human was as it streamed over him, and he was learning everything there was to know about him and delighting in it. Dylan sighed, inhaling the steam. The years melted from him. He felt like he'd won the lottery or received word that it wasn't cancer after all. He was the absolute happiest he'd ever been in his life. The click of the apartment door opening scared him out of the shower. He dried and threw on his new clothes, and when he opened the bathroom door, he found a startled Mr. Langford staring at him with a young couple behind him. The couple exchanged glances. Dylan stammered. I've finished the report, Mr. Langford. The shower's perfect. Best I've ever seen. May I speak to you a moment for my records? Mr. Langford apologized to the pair and followed him out into the hall. A little knot lodged between his brows. Well, I thought you said it would be quick. But when he met Dylan's eyes, his frown softened. Dylan took a breath to steady his buzzing nerves. I want to lease this apartment. The words sputtered out of him like an old tap. I've got to have this apartment. Mr. Langford looked apologetic. I see. Can you, forgive me, I have to ask, afford it? Rent comes to $3,800 a month. I'm not sure, it's not that I wouldn't love to have you as a resident. He shifted uncomfortably. Does shower inspecting pay well? He didn't have to ask. Dylan had never coveted the wealth of the men he'd loathed in the medical system, but as Mr. Langford's gaze swept over his cheap, brandless clothes and big box store loafers, he withered with self-loathing. But the shower's all right, Mr. Langford asked, wringing his hands. It's working and everything. Working. People were so plebeian about showers. Dylan bit back a scoff. It's working, yes, he said, and then excused himself. As he passed the concierge desk, the girl leapt up and hurried to catch his sleeve before he reached the spinning door. There was no question of the flush in her cheeks this time. She couldn't even meet his gaze. I was hoping maybe we could get coffee sometime. Maybe Sunday? Dylan mumbled that he didn't like coffee, but the girl looked so dejected he backpedaled, saying he'd check his schedule. He accepted her phone number and went out onto the street. He had never been the kind of man to draw attention to himself, yet on the way home it seemed as if every person turned to smile at him. By the time he got back to his apartment, 2 other women had given him their phone numbers, and 1 man as well. Catching a glimpse of himself in the hall mirror, he stopped dead in his tracks. He looked 10 years younger. The angles of his face were pleasingly symmetrical in a way he'd never noticed before. His shoulders swelled beneath his polo as if he'd worked out every day of his life. He couldn't fathom how it happened, but there it was, staring him in the face. Dylan Brooks was handsome. After that, the thought of taking a shower anywhere other than 1546 horrified him. He canceled appointments and curled up on the couch. Every passing day, he grew filthier. He couldn't bear to touch the water from his own sink or bathtub. It was like pouring raw sewage over his hands and left a film he couldn't rub off. He washed his clothes over and over, but it soon became clear that washing them was making them disgusting. Soon he couldn't even put them in the machine, and couldn't even bring himself to sit on his furniture, couldn't even climb into bed. Everything was dirty. Everything stank. Something had to be done, and there was only one thing he could think of, the only thing he thought about anymore. 3 weeks after the embarrassing talk in the hall, Dylan called Mr. Langford. I just have one more concern, just popped into my mind, about that shower in 1546. He spoke with all the authority he could muster. A quick chat, just a few minutes, ought to clear it up. I just hate for there to be an issue I missed. You see, it's my professional reputation and all. Oh, I'm afraid that's impossible, Mr. Langford said, and he really did sound sorry. 1546 is rented out, and I can't send a stranger, even a helpful stranger, into a tenant's space without written approval. You understand, of course. Yes, Dylan stammered. Yes, I understand, but it's imperative for the tenant's sake that I'm very sorry, Mr. Brooks. If the tenant complains, I will consult you immediately. When Mr. Langford hung up, dread seeped into Dylan's bones. He couldn't wait until the tenant complained. The tenant would never complain. The tenant would step into that shower and feel the wonderful, delicious water, and they wouldn't ever complain, just like he'd never have complained if he had 1546 to himself. He crouched on the kitchenette tiles, hugging his knees and rocking, disgusted even by the tears dripping down his face. He'd die in this squalor, with dirt under his fingernails, crusted between his toes, sticky on his scalp. He couldn't bear it. No, he had to bathe. It was the only solution. Over the next 3 days, he forced himself to dress and lurk at the coffee shop across the street from the Rosetta View. From there, he could watch the apartment building and note the time that the woman renting 1546 left and returned. He had identified her by the mailbox she had visited on the first 2 days, and he blessed her for a stable routine. Each morning she left at 7 o'clock. Each night she returned at 6:30. It didn't vary. Thursday morning he stood on the street corner, itching, waiting. 7:01, 7:03. He scowled at his watch and noted a smear of grime across his knuckles. Teeth clenched, he shoved his hands into his coat pockets. At 7:05, the woman swept out, coat draped over her arm as she juggled her thermos and purse and briefcase, and jogged on her low heels down the sidewalk. Dylan forced himself to wait another 20 minutes to make sure that in her rush she hadn't forgotten anything, and they pushed through the rotating doors and hurried to the concierge desk. The concierge took him in from head to toe, no smile in her eyes now. "Oh, it's you." He couldn't imagine how he must look, unwashed, unshaven, reeking, but he couldn't fix it now. "I'm sorry, Mr. Langford asked me to check the shower in 1546 again. The tenant complained about the water pressure cutting out on her." The concierge frowned. "Mr. Langford didn't mention it to me." He sounded rather rushed. Dylan said, "I think he just wanted a quick confirmation. Shouldn't take me more than a couple of minutes." "I'm sorry, but I can't let you into a tenant's apartment." He whipped out his phone. "I'll call Mr. Langford if you'd prefer. He said she'd given verbal consent for me to check it, so only the bathroom, of course. You could escort me up if you prefer." The girl recoiled and reached for her phone. "I'll have the janitor meet you there." She spoke briefly with a man named Charlie and then nodded to Dylan. "He'll let you in and wait with you." "Thank you." Dylan gave her a grin, but the effects from the previous shower had worn off. She watched him until he stepped into the elevator. When he reached the 15th floor, he found the janitor waiting. The man must have been a football player in high school, and although his musculature had devolved into something akin to baby fat, he still looked plenty strong enough to break Dylan in two if he tried anything funny. Dylan smiled at him. "Appreciate the help." Charlie's eyes narrowed, but he slid the card key into the door and opened it. Dylan went straight to the bathroom, not so much as glancing at the new furnishings in the apartment. He turned on the water and waited until the steam began curling against the tiles. He peeped out into the hall via the mirror. Charlie leaned against the wall, eyes on his phone while he waited. Quietly, Dylan eased the door shut and locked it. He only had a few minutes, but it would be enough. Dylan tore off his clothes, turned on the shower head, and leapt into the water. He almost sobbed with relief as the torrent cascaded over him, almost burning. The water ran gray as it scoured the city grime from his body. Dylan sighed and turned to let it gush over his face. Far, far away, he heard Charlie's voice, raised and the doorknob shaking, but it seemed to have nothing to do with him. Life's pains and humiliations faded in the deluge. The water brushed off the years, pushed him back through time to easier days. It was an August rain, warm and drenching, thundering in his ears. It hosed away the dusty summer vacations, baptizing him with childhood's untapped potential. It all came rushing back to him, the delights and obsessions of youth, the wide-open future not yet shriveled with experience. It filled him with joy and laughter and set his whole body tingling. A thud and a grunt echoed in another universe. He could die here, he realized, and be content. The water hugged him, lulled him, rocked him like a new mother, every droplet a kiss. How could he ever bear to leave? Far, far, far away, a radio's crunching blip, mumbled voices, a hammering, a voice calling to him. He didn't recognize it. Didn't care. Dylan curled up in the tub as the water rushed over him. He was safe. He was home. We're born from water, he thought, giggling. How pleasant if death is like returning to the womb, surrounded by warmth, the soul cradled and protected. Happiness like he'd never felt swelled within him. His eyes burned with tears. He would burst trying to hold it all in. He would explode into stardust. Coiling up tight, he willed himself to encapsulate it, protect it, become it, all the potential energy in the universe blazing inside of him. The locksmith got the door open, and Mr. Langford pushed past Charlie into the bathroom. Steam fogged the air, blinking out the mirror. A pile of men's filthy clothes lay on the tile, and with a gesture he stood aside to let Charlie sling back the shower curtain, braced for a fight. But the shower was empty. The water whispered as it pattered on the empty tub. Charlie frowned. Mr. Langford, I'm telling you, he was here. Mr. Langford peered into the tub. A gelatinous knot, smaller than a toenail, lay on the white porcelain, leaching a rivulet of pink. As he watched, the knot dissolved and vanished, rushing with the water down the drain. He shivered in the humid air. The apartment door clicked, and a moment later the tenant appeared. What's going on? When I got your text about the locksmith, I thought I'd better come home. Did something happen? Mr. Langford didn't even know what to say. No, just some trouble with the shower. Her eyebrows arched. What trouble? You haven't noticed anything unusual about the shower? The tenant shook her head with a shrug. No, to be honest, I haven't ever used it. I always shower at the gym. Mr. Langford sighed with relief. That's probably for the best. And that's it.
Oh man, that was awesome.
Thank
You
you
so much. Maggie Slater, everybody. It was a great program. The two stories just really coexisted in one program really well. And in case anybody is wondering, Laura and I never consult with each other or with our readers, with our authors about what they're going to read. But pretty much without exception, every week, somehow there's a synergistic thing that happens between the authors and the stories. And it's just a whole unique story hour. It's just a solid program. So Annika and Maggie, thank you so much. Really lovely work. You're welcome back anytime. And we hope to see all of you back next week, where we will be hosting Brandon Crilly and Catherine Cavedo. But once again, Annika Barranti Klein and Maggie Slater, really wonderful program. Thank you both so much. And
Thank you so much for having me.
oh, you bet.
Me too.
Good night, everybody. See you
Good
next
night.
time.